Okay, so we'll start. Hi, everyone. Um, so what I want to do today, we got up to what was going on in the drama was that David finally was able to rule over all of the kingdom, and he was king in Hebron, and then he finally became king over all of Israel. And now he is unified. He is king over Israel. So what he decides to do um, is he decides to do a few things. And now I'm going to not gloss over. I'm going to mention some things that definitely have warrant to have more detail. But I discussed them in my summer series. You could totally feel free to go on the SC's YouTube. I think it has it all there. I did a class on David where I focus on specifically what I'm going to say now in more depth. So I wanted to tonight to talk about it a little bit and then go into more depth into some other things. So basically, what David decides to do is first, one of the first things he decides to do is, in order to help unite the people, is to solidify his nation physically and spiritually in twofold. So what he does is he goes out to capture the rest of Yerushalayim. We learn from Sefer Shoftim, in the end of Sefer Shoftim, there was a big chunk of Yerushalayim that wasn't captured, that was under the Yevusim, and David goes out to capture this. Very interesting war, very, a lot of details, not going to go into it now, but basically, Yoav is the one who, as we spoke about before, Yoav is the one who is a big player in this war and helps capture Yerushalayim, and he sets his capital there. David sets his capital there. So now we have the king, we have the nation, we have the capital. So David decides that I'm physically secure, but I want to make sure that God also has a physical place to be worshipped. So he brings up the Aron. Also, very interesting story. We're not going to go into right now. He brings up the Aron from that was not in Yerushalayim for many years, from the time of well, not Yerushalayim at all, but from Shiloh, it was in Nov, it was in all the places, and now in Givon, and now it's in coming back up. And he tells Natan and Avi, I want to build a house for God, the Beit HaMikdash, essentially. And God tells Natan and Nebuah that David will not do it. He does a brit with David. He tells David that your child will do it, your son will do it, and he will have the continuity. Also, something I went into in depth in a different class, so we're not going to talk about that now. So now all this seems great, okay? All this seems really great, and he looks for the rest of the family of Shaul, and we find the son Mephibosheth, which we spoke about a little bit last time, that his son was crippled. Yonatan's son that was crippled, he does a chesed with him. He really is acting in a way of chesed, in a way of strength. He's doing everything, the way it's supposed to be, so to speak, right? And then we get to this point where, and then he fights the Plishtim, and he finally is able to finish that situation, because we said away from the beginning, it was the Plishtim are always causing problems through the time of Shlomo, to the time of from the time of Shemuel when he was a shofet, from the time of Shaul, and now David ends that, okay, and he fights other wars, and it says Vayosha Hashem et David b'chol asher alach. God is helping him succeed in all his wars. And just an interesting point, I don't want to go too deep into it, but I just found it interesting that when David fights Hadar Ezer ben Rehov Melech Sova, and he captures a lot of his parashim, a lot of his horsemen, he does something which is called Vayakor David et Kol Harechev. He disables, I forgot the exact way they do it, some physical procedure that they do to make the horses not as fast and not as capable, which was a sign of his trust in God. And not one of the things we look back at in Devarim was not to lo yarbeh susim, that he shouldn't have a reliance on the horses and going back to Mitzrayim. So again, he's doing all the right things. He's solidifying it physically, solidifying it spiritually. God is with him, right? And then we get this little summary, which is a little bit weird, because we get this summary of David's malchut, but he's going to be king for much longer. So we see these sukkim where it says, "Vayimloch David al kol Yisrael." All these pop-ups are annoying. He's doing justice and righteousness. He's acting appropriately, and we see his cabinet. Yoav ben Tzruya Sava. He's Yoav is head of the army. Yoshaphat is the mazkir, is the secretary. Sadok and Achituvach Melech the Kohanim. Benayahu is the Ben David Kohanim. It's just listing all his cabinet. So it seems like this is a sum up of his malchut, and in a way it is, because we're going to see a turning point here with David. Up until now, and this is going to be the crux of our lesson tonight. That's why I'm sort of talking about this. Is not going so deep. We're going to go now into the depth about what we're going to talk about now in a minute. But up until now, we see David as this, like, he was chosen, right? The better person than Shaul. He was chosen to be the better leader, the next leader, the one that goes after God, and he does all that. But now we're going to get to a turning point in the story of his life where we see a much more human side of David. I feel even up until now, even with all the challenges that David faced, he almost dealt with them in a superhuman way. He had Shaul running after him. He had the ability to kill Shaul, and he never did. He was, he held back. He had the ability to take his malchut when it wasn't the right time, and he didn't. He waited patiently. He had the ability to do negative things to Shaul and his family, and he only did positive. And he did all these things that you would expect, like above and beyond almost your nature, right? A human nature. And now a little bit, now we're going to see the more human side of David, where he is fallible, he does make mistakes, and we're going to see the very famous story of him and BatSheva. And there's so much different commentaries and thoughts and different studies on this, like really so many things. And what I'm choosing to do is really, I'm not going to go into every nitty-gritty detail and every opinion. What I'm going to do is I want to look at this story as a story that opens our eyes to David as a human, and therefore, when we see that, it doesn't make us look down on him. And I think an opposite. I think the fact that he goes through this whole story and this whole challenge, which leads to other challenges in his life, and we're going to see. I call this class the family drama of David. I forgot exactly how I titled it for myself, but we're going to see how we see that David has his faults. David has family issues with his sons and different things that go on. We're going to see, and as tragic as that is, he's able to overcome it. And we're going to see through what happens is the big difference between him and Shaul, and how ultimately that's the key of why his lineage continues and Shaul's doesn't. So let's go into that. So hold on, yeah, 1 second. Okay, so now we see after all these events, the Vayamet Melech Bnei Ammon, the king of Ammon, dies, and his son Hanun becomes king after him, takes the crown. And David decides, I'm going to do a chesed with Hanun, and he sends in this delegation, this group of abadim, to lenachem oto, to console him. Now, this is a very weird thing, because if we remember who the Melech of Ammon is, that's Nachash, right? Nachash Melech Ammon was the first nation we hear about, which Shaul fought against, who was terrorizing the people of Eshkelad, who was causing all these problems to the people and threatened to poke, to spear their eyes out. And David's doing a chesed with his son. So they have a lot of questions about this. Like, first of all, why is David doing chesed to this person? What happens? And the results of these actions are very negative. So it obviously was not the best decision on David's part. So what happens? He sends this delegation, and the Sarim of Bnei Ammon, his advisors, say, why are you accepting this delegation? David obviously sent these people to spy on you. It doesn't make sense why he would do this. And even though you would think that at the time a punishment for the spies would be death, I mean, I guess even now a lot of countries would hold by that. But this punishment of spying would be death. He doesn't kill them because I think he's still a little bit. It seems that he's still a bit wary. But what he does do is he embarrasses them greatly. He shaves off half their beards, which at the time everyone had beards. So to shave off half the beard was a big embarrassment. To a physical embarrassment that you walked around with till it grew back. And he ripped their clothes. He tore their clothes in half. An embarrassing thing. This gets back to David. David says, you go and wait until your beards come back in Yericho, which was a city from time of Yoshua that wasn't built. We'll talk, that's something else. But they go there quietly in Yericho till their beards come back so they could pass on this, pass the embarrassment. Now that's what happened. But why was David sending this? So the Hamim say that David, if we remember, when he put his family, his parents by Moab, it seems that we never hear of them again. So it seems that a lot of the Hachamim say that Moab killed his family, and there was one brother that escaped to Ammon, and the king of Ammon helped him until David became king and was able to save him, and David was thankful for that. So that's all nice. But at this point, we see the fault here is David is acting as an individual and not as the king of Israel. Because yes, on an individual level, he had the warrant or the need to do a chesed and be Menachem, the son of the Hanun, the son of Nachash when he died. However, as the king of Israel, that's like a big slap in the face to be sending this comfort to a king that terrorized you. So already we see the beginning of David's faults or challenges is when he does things on a personal level as opposed to a level of the Malchut as a king. And we see this is also a big problem of Shaul, but the difference is we're going to see is Shaul, that sort of was his identity, as we saw at the end of his life when Shlomo when he was never able to look at himself truly as a king. David didn't have that problem, but he did have instances where he faltered, and that's when these situations arise. So this starts a war for Ammon between David and Ammon, Israel and Ammon, and Ammon hires out, asks for help. Aram ben Nechov and Aram Sova, the nations of Aram, and they have a lot of soldiers and chariots. And David gets Yoav on the case. David, again, we see David and Yoav. We're going to see have a complicated relationship, but we're going to see slowly how they are foils of each other. Whenever David gets strong, Yoav is not necessarily weak, but he's not doing necessarily the right thing, as we saw with the whole of Ner ben Ner situation. And when David sort of falls or gets weak or doesn't do the right thing, Yoav is there to put him back in the right direction or do the right thing. So we see they have this give and take relationship. So Yoav, and again, he's a strong warrior, right? We know that. So David sends Yoav to start he sends his top soldiers. He doesn't only send Yoav, he sends the Giborim, the head soldiers. And Yoav sees that their military tactic is that they are coming to them on two fronts. Aram is coming from one front and Ammon is coming from another. So what he decides to do militarily is divide the army under him and under his brother Abishai. Again, a warrior we know and love, that he is also a character of strength and of commitment to the Malchut. Okay, and so he divides them, and we see that it's interesting. It is understood through what's going on and through the different battles. Yoav is the stronger warrior. However, he's very PC in how he talks to Abishai. He says, if you need help, he says, he starts off by saying, if I need help, you'll come help me. And then if you need help, I'll come help you. He puts himself in the needing help category first. And he gives everyone a pep talk, and he says, "Chazak v'nitchazek ve'ad amenu." We're going to be strong and courageous for our nation, u'be'ad arei Elohenu, and for our city, and Hashem yaseh tov be'enav, and God's going to do what is right. So you almost could imagine, the nation is feeling the tension. They're getting afraid, but these are the top people, and the enemies are coming at them from two fronts, and Yoav is standing there and giving them this pep talk. We're doing this for our nation. We're doing this for our land. We're doing this for God, um, and and they go, and we see that as much as Yoav has his fault, so to speak, that he might be more rash than David, or might be too quick to act, or might be a little more vengeful and all these things. He is his Sar Savah for a reason. He has this extreme commitment, just like David, to God, to Am Yisrael, and to the nation, right, and to the land, excuse me, yeah. So we see that's how he goes into the war, and they go into the war, and they end up. I don't think I brought the psukim here, but he ends up weakening Aram. Then David comes in and finally wipes them out, and we see that however strong Yoav is, David seems to be the more persistent one, and he'll never stop until the job is done. The same way with Goliath, and the same way with a lot of his wars, as we saw through his career. He doesn't stop till the job is done, and they finish with Aram, but they don't finish with Ammon. So Ammon is still, they weaken them, but it's not finished. And so later on, we see David sends again. Ammon again causes problems to Israel, and David sends Yoav. Now you would think that because of what happened with Aram, that David went and finished the war, that he would do it at this point as well. However, this is where the problem begins. He sends Yoav, and then we see that David is sitting and not going to war, which is something that we saw Shaul do, right? Shaul a lot of times sent others to do his bidding, or was afraid to do his bidding. We don't necessarily see that David is afraid here, but we sort of get this feeling, and we're going to see it throughout the story, that David starts to get, I don't want to necessarily say greedy with power, but maybe comfortable with his power, and that he could send everyone to get his jobs done. We see a lot of the words of the Hebrew word vaishlach, to send. And we see that David gets very comfortable running the show, but not being necessarily involved. Okay, so now, and this is where the story of BatSheva comes in, that David is taking a nap, right? His nation is fighting, Yoav is fighting, and he's taking a nap. He wakes up, he sees this woman bathing, and the Hachamim sort of talk about, was she bathing on the roof? Did he see her from the roof? Was she at fault? Was she not? It's the whole thing about that. Either way, he sees her, and if you ever have gone to, the city of David, you see that the way things are is that it's on a mountain. The houses are all built on different levels. If you were the king, you were living in the highest, most, the biggest, most glorious house. So he could probably see over the people very easily, right? If you've ever been there, it's very, you see how this could happen by no fault of anyone, just the way the geography is. And David, again, we see this, Vaishlach, he sends to find out who she is. And he sends, Vaishlach David Melachim Vayikachea, he sends the messengers to get her to come to him. He sleeps with her, and she gets pregnant, and she tells him that I am pregnant with your child. So this is obviously not the best situation. Oh, I didn't say this. He finds out that she is the wife of Uriah Hachiti, one of his known commanders in the army, and David knows that he's fighting in the army with Yoav, and he's still with her. Now, I'm not going to go into this because the Hamim talk about endlessly. Did he sin? Did he not sin? How did he marry her after? How did this all go down? Bottom line, this was obviously, as the Abarbanel, I'm just going to talk about his opinion for a second, because I think his is, to me, the most resonates with me, is a lot of these Hachamim bent over backwards to justify how David played this out in a kosher way. And in reality, the Abarbanel says, no, that's not what's important. He did sin, but he redeems himself after. And that's what we need to take away from the story. So let's continue the story, and then we'll see how he does redeem himself, because it's not over yet. So now, David, he gets so caught up in his sin that he starts to rationalize almost, and he's oblivious to the reality of what's going on, because then he says, okay, I want to cover this up. I'll get Uriah to come back. He'll go be with his wife. They'll think it's their kid. No one has to know any better. Great. But then Uriah comes back, and it seems that the way the whole story's played out with it's a lot of messengers going back and forth. And, you could imagine that there's the castle gossip, or you know what I mean? And these messengers are not keeping this necessarily secret. So it seems, in a way, also the way Uriah talks to David, it seems that he might have known what happened, and people sort of knew what happened, because there was a messenger going. That, think of all these people involved. There was a messenger that got BatSheva. There was a messenger that BatSheva sent to tell him that she's pregnant. There was a messenger to go get Uriah. There was all these people playing in the story. So it seems almost like illogical to believe that people didn't know. And David sort of is being oblivious and repressing that logic, because sometimes when you get yourself in such a mess, you sort of try to justify it and make all these different stories about how this is really not such a big deal, but it is a big deal. So now he tries to get Uriah to go be with BatSheva, so he covers up the pregnancy. So, and Uriah says, how can I, he talks very, very disrespectfully to the king. And the Hachamim actually say, this is the way he speaks to him is considered mered b'malchut, is a rebellion. The way he's speaking and talking to the king is a way that is so disgraceful that it's like a rebellious speech. And he tells him, Ha'aron v'Yisrael v'Yehuda yoshvim b'Sukkot v'Adoni Yoav v'Avdei Adoni al pnei hasadeh. The Aron, right? They used to take the Aron to war, and Yeshiva Yehuda and the people are all camping in war. And Adoni Yoav, my leader Yoav, is standing in war. And I am going to go be with my wife? No, I'm not going to do that. And he doesn't go. And this is where the Hachamim say he calls Yoav his master, and it's just not a good situation. And he ends up sending, when David realizes he can't cover the situation up that way, he sends Uriah back to the front lines with a letter which tells Yoav, put him in the front lines, and have everyone retreat and get him killed, which is almost illogical, because militarily no soldiers are going to leave one soldier alone. So he's almost trying to make it comfortable for him in his mind that no other soldiers will be killed. But in reality, when this plays out, of course other soldiers are going to be killed, because they're not going to leave one soldier alone. So Yoav does play this out, but other casualties are met because of this. And also, this is interesting that this is sort of a page out of Shaul's playbook that we saw in the beginning, that he kept trying to get David killed by sending him off to battles. But that never worked, but here it does work, and Uriah gets killed. And we see that Yoav is not so on board with this. He sends back a messenger to David, and it's sort of in a way that's sort of telling David, mention about Uriah dying, let David know that this, to sort of put it out in the open. Like I said, it was sort of known what was going on. And now they find out that Uriah dies. BatSheva mourns for Uriah, and then after she goes through the mourning, he marries her, and she gives birth to this son. And it says very clearly, Hashem is not happy with this. This is a big no-no. And by the way, just interesting to compare, when we go back to the Naval and Abigail story, when David also marries someone's widow, he does that whole story in a much more patient, thought out, correct way, so to speak. Here, he wants BatSheva, and seems to be impulsive. He takes her, he gets caught in the situation, he tries to cover it up. It's all so tainted, and not done in the right way. And God obviously is not happy with this. So now, oh wow, the time's getting ahead. Okay, so now David, Hashem sends Natan to David, and Natan gives him a parable, a mashal, to have him realize his fault himself. And the beauty of this is, first of all, David does very quickly realize his fault, and then he's able to put his judgment on himself. It talks about a man who has one sheep, and the other man who has so many sheep, and he's rich. And then the man who's the rich man takes the man who has one sheep and kills it, and then he tells him ben mavet, he should die, even though that's not the case. If someone really does steal something, he's not a ben mavet. But David, says this is really not, he gets very strong and negative about it. And then Natan says, Atah ha'ish, you're the man. You're the one who acted inappropriately and took this Uriah's one wife. You have it all. God gave you it all. And Also, I read something that like the mashal, I'm not going to read it word for word now, but the mashal is very, very obviously about David and the whole situation. It talks about very clearly the one person with one, then the one sheep and the one who has all, and it's so obvious that it's about David. However, he doesn't see that. Again, this justification in his brain. And Natan says, "Ata ish," and God said, "I made you king, and this is, I gave you everything, and this is what you felt you needed to do, and you had all these things, and this is what you like. How could you do this disgraceful act?" And David says, "Chatati laHashem." David says automatically, I sinned, and that's like all he says. He admits his fault, and this is the big contrast to Shaul, where Shaul, as we saw, anytime Shemuel told him that he sinned, he came up with a laundry list of excuses. And here David says, "I sinned. I get it. I sinned." And because of that, Natan says, "You're not going to die," because he said that the person in the mashal should die. He says, "You're not going to die, but God is going to punish you." And what's going to be the punishment? Lo tasur cherev bebetecha. There's going to be a lot of fighting within your own home, and someone's going to embarrass you publicly. You did it beseter, and it's going to be, and that's going to be publicly. And the son that you give birth, that BatSheva gives birth to, will die. So, but all these things will come true. There's going to be a lot of fighting in David's family. There's going to be a evil from your own house, in your own family. There's going to be someone who sleeps with your wives in public. You did beseter, and this is going to be public. And now I didn't bring all the psukim, but basically what happens is the son of BatSheva gets sick, and David mourns, he prays, he fasts for this son to live. And then the son dies. That's at 70s, I think, I'm almost positive, that's 7 days old. And then David, or his advisors are so frightened to go tell him because of the way he's so distraught over the sickness. But then he gets up right away and he eats, and he said, "Well, now I can't do anything about it." So it's interesting. There's two sort of ways to look at it. I think one way to look at it is that David sort of accepted God's judgment in a very extreme way, right? Like, I don't think many people that could experience a tragedy and just say, "Well, this is what God, deemed of me, the tragedy, and I'm just like, I can't change it, so I have to just deal with it." I think most people will grieve and will mourn for whatever, the tragedy, even if it can't be changed. However, there's another side, is that the fact that he was praying for the son was almost the anomaly, because this son is a constant reminder of the fact that he sinned. So it doesn't seem like you wouldn't think logically that he would want this, that he would sort of be, I don't want to say okay with him dying, but sort of, if he's there, it's going to be a constant reminder of David's sin, David's fault. So when that David praying for the son is almost a righteous. I mean, obviously praying for the son is righteous, but it's almost more, more of a good situation, or looked better upon, because I see the question, why is the baby considered mom's dead? I'll talk about that in a second. But I just saw the chat, sorry. So he I lost my train of thought. Oh, so he almost feels like, now that this baby didn't make it, I'm not gonna have this constant reminder of my fault. And we see also the greatness of David is that he does marry BatSheva. He does right by her, because he could have just left her to the wind, which we do see what's gonna happen in the next story about that now that she was that now she's sort of tainted, because she doesn't have, her husband's dead. She slept, she's been with the king. She's going to be left for nothing. No one's going to want to marry her. And she's going to be, at that time it was a big deal. Like, even, it's always seems shocking to me that in the Torah it says, if someone rapes a woman, he's chayav to marry that woman. And it always didn't make sense to me. Like, why would someone want to marry their rapist, God forbid? But at that time, if someone was raped, no one's going to want to marry them or be with them. So they almost are better off marrying their rapist, because then they'll at least have some protection in that context of that society. I'm not saying now, but I'm saying in that society. So him marrying BatSheva is doing right by her and keeping and making sure she's not, left alone. So now, someone in the chat asked about why isn't this child a mamzed? That goes back to the whole question of, did he sin? Did he not sin? There's this whole, I'm going to talk about it for a second because I want to move on to the next thing, but there is this opinion among the Hachamim that at the time of David, because there were so many battles, people would write these divorce papers to their wives before they went out to battle, because they were afraid of leaving their wife an aguna, a woman who doesn't know if her husband is alive or dead. Which actually was interesting. In September 11th, there was big issues with agunot because they couldn't find bodies, and people didn't know if their husbands were alive or not. And this woman now, is she a widow? Is she married? Like, they don't know what's going on. So just interesting. So in the time of David, it is told that because they had so many wars, they were not necessarily legally married. That doesn't mean that she should have been with other men and she should be going around. But in this case, it wasn't an actual sin by the letter of the law. Again, I didn't want to go into all the details of that, but that's the whole mamzer situation. Anyway, he marries her. I didn't bring this all in, but he marries her, and he has obviously Shlomo, right? And he's named by BatSheva and by Natan, Shlomo and Yedidiah. And it's interesting that it doesn't seem in the psukim that David names him. So it does seem that even though David did write about BatSheva, it seems that maybe he wasn't as involved. Maybe it did remind him of his sin. Maybe we don't really know what was going on there. And we also see actually later in life, even though he does know and is told that Shlomo is going to be the king, later at the end of his life, we'll talk about this next time, when Adoniah rebels, BatSheva has to go in and remind him of that. So now we're going to get to the consequence, one of the consequences of all this action. We said of the BatSheva thing. And we said that one of the things is yera'a b'toch betecha, that there's going to be evil from your house. So now we're going to start talking about the story now and continue it next time, because it's a little bit long and I want to give it the proper attention. But David has a son, Avshalom, and Avshalom has a beautiful sister named Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, who's the crown prince, was very important. He's the next in line. He's the crown prince. He has this obsession with Tamar. He is, let's say, hitchalot. He's like lovesick with her, and he knows he can't do anything about it because it's his sister. When there's different opinions, actually, is it his half sister, meaning they're both David's children? Was Tamar actually a daughter from before David married Avshalom's mother? It's all these different questions, but either way, she was part of the family unit, and he was not going to marry her. And now Amnon, it says a Re'ash, a good friend, Ushmo Yonadav, ben Shemaya ach David, ben Yonadav ish chacham me'od. He's one of the people that is called Chacham. He's a very smart person. And Yonadav, it's his cousin. It's the son of David's brother. And he notices that that Amnon is not himself. And Amnon says, and he tells Amnon what's going on, and Amnon tells him, "I want to be with Tamar. I can't be with Tamar." And he gives him this whole elaborate plan that he should pretend to be sick, ask David for Tamar to come to his house, cook for him in his sick bed. She'll come cook for him. They'll be alone, and then he can seduce her. However, he does this, but in a little bit of he takes the advice, but he taints it, and he takes the advice and he tells David, I'm sick. I want. Can you send my? And he says, my sister Tamar. He's trying to cover it up that anything bad could happen. And David sends Tamar to Amnon because he's not really suspicious. He doesn't really see that this is going to be a problem. And we see that Yonadav sort of thought he was going to seduce her and maybe try to convince her to marry him in some way. And we even see that however, Amnon instead is taken over by his lust and he rapes her. And and Tamar tries to do everything she can to stop this. She says, please, this is something that's not done in Israel. Let's talk to David. Maybe he'll give you to me in an okay way. We could get married somehow. And the commentators speak about, was that just her, trying to pull at straws to save herself, or was that the truth? But that's not really clear exactly, because we went back to the fact that maybe she's not his sister, maybe whatever. Either way, he rapes her, and we see how evil he is. When he rapes her, it says, he rapes her, he hates her, he has a huge, big hatred. His hatred is more than the love he had. And he says, kum lechi, he kicks her out. And she says, please, don't embarrass me like this, don't send me away like this. And he calls his Nadim, his servants, and he literally has them take her out of the house and lock the door behind her. And very evil, very, very evil. And we see that it seems that it wasn't that he really loved her. It was a lust. And once his desire was fulfilled, he was done. He was like, I don't. And I read that he was disgusted with himself. So the hatred he portrayed to her was the hatred he portrayed to himself, that he kept having this desire, and now that he did it, and that he accomplished his desire, fulfilled his desire in such a disgusting way, he feels disgusted with himself, and he's projecting that on her. So now she goes out. She's kicked out, excuse me. And she has, again, we see this idea of clothing. She has this ketonet pasim, this special coat that was worn by the Betulot, the daughters of the king that were Betulot, the virgin daughters of the king. And now she goes and she puts herself in mourning. And Avshalom, her brother, sees this. And he said, what happened? She tells him what happened. And Avshalom says, I'll come with me. I'll take care of you. And David hears this. And David is he's very angry, but he doesn't do anything. He's just angry about it. And Avshalom does not talk to Amnon. It says, he hates him for what he did. So now this starts to build the big drama between David's children. And we're gonna see that, let's see, okay, I'll talk about this a little bit, we'll talk more next time. I just want that basically Avshalom and Amnon are opposites. Amnon has a desire, and he fulfills it quickly, hastily, in a horrible way. And now Avshalom has this hatred for Amnon, and he wants to have his revenge, but he's very calculated and he's very patient. He waits 2 years after this incident. So it could seem to the outside that he is over it, he moved on, and he has this sheep shearing party. We said also this is a common thing. Naval had a sheep shearing party, it was a big deal. And he invites all his brothers, and which is very normal to invite, the people to the party. And then he tries to invite David. And David says, no, I'm not gonna go. And he says, then could you send Amnon in your place, the crown prince in your place, convince him to go? And David is not thrilled with the idea, but then he ends up saying, okay. Because he convinces him, and he says, okay. Again, the same way David sent Tamar to a negative situation, he's sending Amnon to a negative situation. Because what happens, Avshalom tells his soldiers, when you see that Amnon gets drunk, kill him, okay? So now Avshalom has his people kill Amnon. The rest of the brothers run away because they're afraid that maybe Avshalom is going to kill all of the brothers to take over the power, which could be and happens in royal families, that they wipe out the family to take the power, and they run. And the knowledge was that all the sons were killed. And then Yonadav again comes up and says, no, only Amnon was killed because of Tamar. And that's sort of the relief that happens, that only Amnon was killed. And now Avshalom runs to Gashur, Talmai Melech Gashur, which is actually his paternal grandfather. Okay, it says, we saw before when it lists the lineage, this is not paternal, sorry, obviously not Yishai, maternal grandfather, his mother's father, and he's in Gashur for 3 years. And David he's very distraught over this. He finally gets over the Amnon thing because he died, and so he moved on from that. But the fact that Avshalom is in Galut, he is very distraught over. And yeah, Yoav sees this, and again, Yoav stepping up, he sees that this is not a good situation for the Malchut. And we see that even though the situation is not ideal, and he might not want Avshalom to come back, he sees that this is what's needed for David. And we see also that it seems to be underlying that David was running the nation maybe in more of a hesitant way than he was used to because of all this situation going on. So he convinces this Isha Mitkah, Isha Chama, to come to David and give him a judicial parable, a mashal, and say, let's talk about the story about her two sons, and one killed the other, and now the other one is her family's threatening to kill the other one, and what should she do? And I'm not going to go into the whole mashal now because that's also very interesting, but basically we see that through a smart woman, back to also Abigail, through a smart woman, Yoav, I don't want to say manipulates, but allows David to see that it's time to bring Avshalom back. Avshalom comes back to Yerushalayim, but David sort of makes this weird compromise that he could come back, but I won't see him. And Avshalom is not okay with that. And now Avshalom is, I'll go back in a second. Avshalom is in Yerushalayim for 2 years. So this is already 7 years, if I'm not mistaken, right? Because it was 2, then he killed Amnon, then 3 in Gashur, so that's 5, and then another 2 in Yerushalayim. So this is already 7 years from the rape of Tamar. And Avshalom keeps trying to tell Yoav, why am I coming back here? If I can't, I want to see the king. I want to see the king. And Yoav doesn't meet with Avshalom. Avshalom ends up burning the field of Yoav to get his attention. Yoav says, what did you do? And he says, oh, well, now I finally got your attention. I want you to meet with the king to reconcile. And this is actually a big fault, I think, retroactively we see that Avshalom makes an enemy of Yoav, and that's going to be his downfall. Because until this point, it seems like Yoav was sort of, I don't want to say the biggest fan of Avshalom, but he was on his side. He wanted to sort of reconcile, help him a little bit. But here we see he totally destroys that relationship, and Yoav, after his field was destroyed, agrees to make that meeting. And it says, Vayeshek HaMelech LaAvshalom, that David kisses Avshalom. But it's the way the Hamim read it, it's a very cold kiss. It's HaMelech, it's not his father, it's the king. And if you compare it, they compare it to the meeting of Yosef and Yaakov in Mitzrayim, when they fall on each other's shoulders and they cry and they kiss, and it's a whole beautiful reunion. This is a very cold, distant kiss. So this sort of is the last straw for Avshalom, and we're going to see that he enacts a rebellion in the next event. And I didn't talk about this yet, but before we see Avshalom, he was extremely good looking. He had amazing, beautiful hair. Everyone was enamored by his beauty. And we see that this seems a little bit like, why is this being told now? So we see that, number one, this is helping us understand how he's able to get the people on his side. He's charismatic, he's good looking. And we also see that this could sort of be David not knowing where to place him, because David could sort of think maybe he is worthy for the Malchut. He has all the, he has the looks, he has the charisma, and this is what Shaul had, and what Shmuel was looking at David's brothers before he picked that they were good looking and all that. So we do see that there's this idea of looks and charisma in being king, but it's not going to last if they don't have their heart in the right place. And we see that Avshalom, we're going to see what happens in the rebellion, he doesn't really have his heart in the right place. So what I want to sum up here for I think that was there was a lot of stuff going on, but what I want to sum up here is basically that that David here we see him being human. We see him falling. I don't know why I'm seeing myself twice. It's just weird. Anyway, we see him being human. We see him failing. We see him having family issues. We see him with all the realness. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say this. Interestingly enough, the story of BatSheva is not told in the Devrei Yamim that he takes her. And it's sort of saying that that, and a question also was asked is why wasn't David's malchut taken away and Shaul's was? Because this seems to be, and as his whole character, this is a blip in the radar. This is a little blemish. It's not the whole thing being ruined, right? This is David, as opposed to Shaul, is able to accept his fault and understand his challenges and always reconnect to God, where Shaul was always looking to justify it, right? Justify his faults and not necessarily overlook them, but pretend they're not there. So yeah, I think that's really the takeaway of all this, and we're going to see in the next lesson, which I'm almost positive is our last of the series. I'm going to double check, but of two rebellions that David faces in his lifetime as king, and how he's able to overcome them, and how essentially through all these challenges he's able to impart his malchut eventually on his son Shlomo, who is the one who builds the mikdash and brings the peace and everything. So yeah, I hope that you're able to see the beauty in the humanity of David, because I think that realness helps us also, not necessarily cut ourselves slack, but allow ourselves to build from that and not get stuck in our faults, but build above our faults. So thank you. Any questions, comments? I'm happy to take. All right. Thank you. Have a good night, day.